By the time I reached the Ellison estate that evening, every window on the first floor was glowing like the house had swallowed a chandelier. White roses climbed the iron gate in thick winter arrangements. Valet attendants moved across the circular driveway in black coats, and through the tall glass doors I could see guests already drifting through the foyer with champagne flutes in their hands. My sister Vanessa had always wanted her life to look expensive before anyone asked whether it was happy. Tonight, standing at the entrance of her engagement party, I could see she had finally gotten exactly what she wanted. The house looked like a magazine spread. Gold-rimmed glasses, crystal lights, a string quartet tucked beneath the staircase, white orchids in vases taller than some children. Even the air smelled rich, like perfume, polished wood, and money that had never worried about running out. I sat in my car for a moment, with both hands on the steering wheel, looking down at the pale blue dress I had chosen, after trying on 4 others. It was simple, soft, and knee-length. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would compete with Vanessa. I had even pinned my hair back the way my mother liked, because some foolish part of me still believed that if I arrived carefully enough, quietly enough, useful enough, maybe tonight she would see me without needing to correct me first. I was 36 years old, too grown to want my mother's approval and still, apparently, not grown enough to stop hoping for it. Inside the house, a woman at the registration table asked my name. "Rachel Morgan," I said. She scanned the printed list with one manicured finger, then paused. "I'm sorry, could it be under a different last name?" "No. Rachel Morgan. I'm Vanessa's sister." Her smile tightened. The polite kind people use when the problem is not their fault, but they are still standing in front of it. "Let me check the family table." She turned a page, then another. My stomach gave a small warning twist before my mind caught up. "I can wait," I said, as though waiting had not become one of my most practiced talents. Before she could answer, my mother appeared from the hallway wearing a silver lace dress and the expression she reserved for emergencies, bad photographs, and me. "Rachel," she said. Not warmly, not coldly, just efficiently. "You're late." I looked at my phone. "I'm 10 minutes early." "Guests are already here." That was my mother's version of being wrong. Change the subject and make someone else feel responsible for noticing. She reached for my arm and guided me away from the registration table before I could ask why my name was missing. "Come with me. We've had a small issue with the catering staff." I followed her down a side corridor past framed oil paintings and a powder room that smelled like lilies. "What kind of issue?" 2 servers called out sick. "Honestly, people have no sense of responsibility anymore." She said this while looking directly at me. Though I had worked 12 hours the night before at Mercy General and still come home to iron the table runners Vanessa insisted I bring because the rental company's shade of ivory was too cold. We entered a kitchen so large it looked like a restaurant pretending to be a home. Caterers moved in tight circles around stainless steel counters. Trays of lamb, asparagus, crab cakes, and tiny pastries lined every surface. My mother opened a pantry door and pulled out a folded black apron. "Here," she said. I stared at it. "What is that for?" "Rachel, don't start." I asked a question. Her eyes flicked toward a chef who was too professional to listen and too human not to hear. She lowered her voice. "We need you to help serve until dinner is settled. Just pass plates, refill water, keep an eye on the older guests. You're good at that sort of thing." That sort of thing. Caring, carrying, watching, fixing. The invisible labor that made other people's evenings run smoothly enough for them to forget a human being was doing it. "I came as a guest," I said. My mother sighed like I had embarrassed her on purpose. "You came as family. Family helps. Does Vanessa know?" "Vanessa has enough on her mind tonight." Of course she did. Vanessa's mind had always been treated like fragile crystal, while mine was apparently a storage closet where everyone could toss whatever they did not want to carry. "Mom, I worked a double yesterday. And I'm sure that was very admirable," her smile sharpened. "But this is important. Grant's family is important. There are donors here, business leaders, a few people from the governor's office. We cannot have the evening look disorganized." I looked down at the apron in her hand. "So you want me organized out of sight?" Her jaw tightened. "I want you to stop making everything about your feelings." That sentence had followed me my entire life. When Vanessa cried, she was sensitive. When I cried, I was dramatic. When Vanessa needed help, she was overwhelmed. When I needed help, I was selfish. I reached for the apron, not because I agreed, but because half the kitchen had gone quiet and old habits can move your hands before self-respect can stop them. My mother's shoulders relaxed as soon as I took it. That hurt more than the request itself. She had expected me to fold, and I had. "Thank you," she said, already turning toward the door. "And Rachel? Maybe stay near the dining room entrance. The press photographer is mostly focused on the front parlor." "There it was," said softly enough to deny later. "Do not stand too close to the people who matter. Do not ruin the picture." I tied the apron around my waist in silence. For the next hour, I carried trays through rooms full of people who smelled like expensive cologne and spoke in names instead of sentences. The senator's office called. "The Ellisons are expanding into Charleston. Grant is practically guaranteed a seat on the foundation board." I offered crab cakes to women who did not look at my face and refilled glasses for men who lifted them without saying thank you. Several guests assumed I worked for the caterer and asked where the restroom was, whether the salmon had dairy, whether I could find more cocktail napkins. I answered each question politely because I knew how to be invisible without making it uncomfortable for anyone else. Then Vanessa entered the room. My sister had chosen a white beaded gown that looked more bridal than engagement appropriate, though no one would dare tell her that. Diamonds flashed at her ears, her hair fell in perfect waves over one shoulder, and Grant Ellison stood beside her with the confident ease of a man born into rooms that rearranged themselves around him. He was handsome in the clean, expensive way certain men are handsome when no one has ever told them no long enough for it to matter. Vanessa saw me near the champagne table with a tray in my hands. For 1 second, something like guilt crossed her face. Then she smiled. "Rachel, there you are. Mom said you were helping. That's so sweet of you." Sweet. I wanted to ask if she had noticed there was no chair for me. I wanted to ask if she had watched our mother hand me an apron and decided her perfect night mattered more than her sister's dignity. Instead I said, "Congratulations, Vanessa." She leaned in to kiss my cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Thank you. And honestly, don't take this the wrong way, but it's probably better like this. You always get awkward at formal things." "Do I?" "You know what I mean. You're more comfortable helping people." Grant's eyes moved over me, lingering not in attraction but assessment. "That's a useful quality," he said. "Not everyone needs the spotlight." I looked at him. Some people are never offered it. His smile did not change, but his eyes cooled. Vanessa gave a small laugh, the kind meant to smooth over tension without correcting the person who caused it. "Rachel works at Mercy General," she told him. "Administrative support, patient coordination, that kind of thing." "Clinical intake," I said, "and emergency support when needed." "Right," Vanessa said quickly. "Hospital things." Hospital things. 3 weeks earlier, those hospital things had meant noticing that a young trauma patient's blood pressure was dropping too fast after everyone else thought he had stabilized. They had meant arguing with a resident who wanted to wait for imaging. They had meant calling Dr. Patel directly, breaking protocol just enough to save time, pressing my hand against a young man's shoulder while he whispered that he could not feel his legs, and I told him to keep looking at me. They had meant standing outside an operating room at 3 a.m. with blood on my shoes, learning only later that the patient was Governor William Carter's son. But privacy laws kept that story locked inside hospital walls, and pride kept me from using it like a weapon at a party where my family had already decided I was less than them. "Excuse me," I said, because my hands were starting to shake around the tray. I slipped into the dining room, where the long table had been set for 26 guests beneath a ceiling painted with clouds. White place cards sat above gold chargers. I knew I should not look. I looked anyway. Vanessa Morgan. Grant Ellison. Patricia Morgan, my mother. Several Ellisons. An aunt who had once forgotten my birthday 3 years in a row. A cousin who lived in Denver and had not visited since 2018. No Rachel Morgan. Not at the main table. Not at the side tables. Not near the kitchen door. My absence had not been accidental. It had been designed. I touched the back of an empty service chair against the wall and felt something inside me go quiet. Not calm. Quiet. There is a difference. Calm is peace. Quiet is what happens when pain becomes too old to keep shouting. I picked up the tray again and stepped back into the parlor just as my mother raised her glass for the first toast. "To Vanessa," she said, glowing under the chandelier. "My beautiful daughter, the one who has made this family so proud." People applauded. Vanessa pressed a hand to her chest. Grant kissed her temple. I stood behind them in a black apron, holding a tray of untouched champagne, and felt the room tilt around one word. The one. Not one of. Not my daughters. The one. My mother continued speaking, something about elegance, legacy, and the joining of two exceptional families. I heard almost none of it. I was watching the guests watch her, watching them accept the story she sold so easily, that Vanessa was the jewel and I was part of the service around her shine. When the toast ended, I turned to leave before my face betrayed me. That was when Grant stepped into my path. He took a glass from my tray, looked me up and down, and smiled just loudly enough for the people nearest him to hear. "Well," he said, "at least she knows where she belongs." For one breath, the room did not move. Then a few people laughed softly, uncertainly. The way people laugh when cruelty comes dressed in a tuxedo and they do not want to be the first to call it by name. My fingers tightened around the tray. Vanessa looked away. My mother's eyes warned me not to embarrass them, and somewhere beyond the front doors, just as I swallowed the words burning in my throat, a sudden flash of camera lights swept across the windows, followed by a voice from the foyer announcing that Governor Carter had arrived. The name Governor Carter moved through the parlor like someone had opened a window and let in a different kind of air. Every laugh changed shape, every back straightened, every glass paused halfway to someone's mouth. Grant's smile sharpened into something practiced, political, and hungry, while Vanessa lifted one hand to her hair as if the governor himself had arrived to inspect every curl. My mother's face, only seconds earlier tight with warning, bloomed into a public smile so quickly I almost admired the discipline of it. "Everyone," she said, clapping her hands softly as if this were a stage and we were all trained performers, "please, let's make room near the foyer." No one looked at me anymore. That should have been a relief, but humiliation has a way of staying warm even after attention moves on. I stood there with the tray in my hands, Grant's words still hanging between my ribs. "At least she knows where she belongs." A man I had met 20 minutes ago had been able to name the place my family had spent years building for me. Behind them, beneath them, useful only when silent. The foyer brightened with camera flashes again, and the string quartet stumbled into a more formal piece. I heard the front doors open, heard the low murmur of security, heard someone from Grant's family whisper, "He really came." Governor William Carter was not just a politician in our state. He was a man people spoke of with the careful respect reserved for power that could still make phone calls after dinner. His wife had died of cancer years earlier, and his only son, Ethan, had become part of his public story in the way children of powerful people often do, always smiling in campaign photos, always looking both proud and slightly trapped beneath other people's expectations. 3 weeks before that engagement party, Ethan Carter had arrived at Mercy General with no smile at all. The memory hit me so suddenly that the gold room around me blurred. It had been 17 inches the morning, the hour when hospital hallways feel both too bright and strangely underwater. I was working clinical intake because 2 nurses were out with the flu and our emergency department had been overflowing since sunset. Mercy General was not the hospital wealthy families chose when they had time to choose. It was the hospital where ambulances came when minutes mattered more than reputation, where uninsured parents apologized for being sick, where old men came in too late because they did not want to be a burden, where we learned to stretch supplies, patience, and miracles until all 3 nearly tore. The trauma call came through as a multi-vehicle crash off Route 19. Male, early 20s, possible head injury, abdominal trauma, unstable at scene. We had 3 beds open and 5 patients already in places that were not technically beds. Dr. Patel was handling a cardiac arrest 2 rooms over. The charge nurse looked like she had aged 10 years since midnight. When the paramedics rolled the young man in, his face was gray beneath streaks of blood, one arm hanging at an angle that made my own bones ache. He was conscious. Barely. "Name?" I asked, moving beside the stretcher as the team transferred him. His lips moved. No sound came. A paramedic answered for him. "Wallet says Ethan Carter. We haven't confirmed." At first, the name meant nothing. Not because I did not know it, but because in trauma, names become secondary to airways, pulses, pressure, blood. I cut open his shirt while another nurse attached leads. His abdomen was rigid. His blood pressure was low but not crashing. Not yet. That was the dangerous part. People in early shock can look stable just long enough for a busy room to believe them. I had seen it too many times. "Ethan," I said, leaning close. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened halfway. They were blue, unfocused, terrified. "My back," he whispered. "I can't. Don't try to move. I placed a hand on his shoulder, firm enough to anchor him. Stay with my voice. The resident assigned to him, young and brilliant, in the way young doctors can be brilliant before experience teaches them humility, wanted imaging first. Pressure's holding, he said. Let's get CT. I looked at the monitor, then at Ethan's skin, then at the way his breathing changed when he tried not to groan. Something was wrong in the quiet spaces between the numbers. His pressure is not holding, I said. It's pretending. The resident frowned. We need imaging before surgery. We need surgery before he bleeds out in radiology. He did not like my tone. People rarely do when a woman without a prestigious title refuses to soften the truth. Rachel, I've got it. But he did not. His eyes were on the chart. Mine were on the patient. Ethan's pulse climbed. His pressure dipped again. His fingers grabbed weakly at the sheet. Cold, he whispered. I had heard that word before from bleeding patients. It still frightened me. I stepped out and called Dr. Patel directly, breaking the chain of command because sometimes procedure is a hallway you do not have time to walk down. Patel, I need you in trauma 2 now. Possible internal bleed. Young male. Pressure dropping. Rigid abdomen. Worsening pallor. Resident wants CT. How bad? He asked. Bad enough that I am calling you while he can still speak. Dr. Patel was there in less than a minute. He looked once at Ethan, once at me, then at the resident. Now. The room changed after that. It always does when hesitation ends. Blood was ordered. Consent became an emergency form. Someone finally recognized the name and froze for half a second before remembering that famous sons bleed like everyone else. As we rushed toward the elevators, Ethan's hand caught my wrist. His grip was weak, but fear gave it intention. My dad, he said. We'll call him. Don't let him see me scared. The sentence nearly broke me, not because he was the governor's son, but because he was young, hurt, and still trying to protect a father from pain he could not control. I bent close as the elevator doors opened. Your job is not to look brave. Your job is to stay alive. He stared at me, and for one brief second, he seemed to hear me through the blood loss, the pain, and the bright terror of the hospital lights. Okay, he whispered. I did not see him again until morning, after surgery, when Dr. Patel walked past the intake desk and said, You were right. Splenic rupture. Another 20 minutes and we lose him. He said it quietly, without ceremony, because hospitals do not stop for every life saved. A woman in room 6 needed discharge papers. A man in triage was vomiting into a plastic basin. The printer jammed, the coffee burned. The world continued, as it always does, even after a person escapes death by inches. Later that day, 2 men in suits came from the governor's office. They spoke with administration. We were reminded about privacy, discretion, and legal obligations we already understood. No public statements, no names, no stories. I signed nothing because I had nothing to sign. Confidentiality was not a special rule for important people. It was the rule for everyone. Still, before they left, one of the men found me near the supply room. Miss Morgan? He asked. I turned, exhausted enough that my feet felt separate from my body. Yes? His expression softened. The governor knows what you did. He wanted me to tell you that when his son is strong enough, he hopes to thank you himself. I nodded because I did not trust myself to say anything. Then I went back to stocking gauze. That was all. No medal. No announcement, no family group chat. No moment where my mother realized the daughter she treated like extra furniture had helped save the governor's only child. I went home that morning, showered blood and antiseptic from my arms, slept 4 hours, and woke to 3 texts from Vanessa about the engagement party centerpiece colors. I never told her. I never told Mom, not because I was humble in some saintly way. I was not. Part of me wanted to tell them so badly it burned. I wanted to place the truth between us like a blade and watch them finally step back. But the story was not mine alone. Ethan Carter's worst night was not a trophy for me to carry into family arguments, so I kept it locked inside me, where so many other things had been stored. Back in the Ellison parlor, the tray felt heavier in my hands. I could hear Governor Carter's voice now from the foyer, warm and practiced, greeting Grant's father, thanking someone for the invitation. The photographer's flash lit the doorway in bursts. My mother rushed past me, then stopped abruptly when she noticed I was still standing near the main room. Rachel, she hissed. Not here. I looked at her. Where would you like me to disappear to? Her smile stayed fixed for the guests, but her eyes hardened. "Do not be difficult tonight. I'm holding a tray and an apron at my sister's engagement party. I think I have been very cooperative." "Lower your voice." Vanessa swept up beside her, all diamonds and panic. "Rachel, please, this night matters. Grant's family has been trying to get the governor here for months. Then you should all enjoy him." I moved to set the tray down, but my mother caught my wrist. Not hard enough to leave a mark, just hard enough to remind me she still expected obedience. "For once in your life," she whispered, "be useful without making people uncomfortable." There it was again, the family prayer spoken only over me. Be useful. Be quiet. Be grateful for the corner they give you. I looked down at her hand on my wrist, and for the first time that evening, I did not feel ashamed. I felt tired, in a way that had edges. Across the room, Grant lifted his glass and called for everyone's attention. "Before Governor Carter joins us for a few words," he said, beaming like a man already posing for tomorrow's newspaper, "Patricia wanted to offer one more toast to the Morgan family and to the incredible woman I am lucky enough to marry." My mother released my wrist and glided forward as if she had not just bruised something no one could see. Guests gathered near the fireplace. Cameras shifted. The governor remained partly hidden near the foyer, speaking with Grant's father. I stood behind the last row of guests, still in the apron, still holding the tray because no one had thought to take it from me. My mother raised her glass again. "To my Vanessa," she said, her voice rich with pride. "The daughter who always knew how to rise, how to shine, and how to make this family proud." Applause began before she had finished. Vanessa smiled with wet eyes. Grant squeezed her waist. Cameras flashed. I stood so close I could see the tiny tremble in my mother's champagne, yet I felt farther away than if I had been watching through a window from the street. Then, as the applause swelled, Governor Carter turned toward the sound, and his eyes moved across the room, past Grant, past Vanessa, past my mother's shining face, until they stopped on me. The smile vanished from his face. He stared at the apron, the tray, and then at my eyes. And suddenly, the most powerful man in the room began walking straight toward the woman everyone else had mistaken for help. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. Governor Carter's eyes had passed over half the most important people in the room and stopped on me, but that made so little sense inside the story my family had written for the evening that my mind tried to correct what my body already knew. He was not looking at the flowers behind me. He was not looking for a server. He was not searching for the restroom or a quiet side door. He was looking at me with the startled recognition of a man who had found someone he had not expected to see standing in an apron, holding a silver tray. The room noticed him noticing. That was the first crack in the polished surface of the party. Grant's smile faltered only slightly, but I saw it. Vanessa's hand, still resting against his sleeve, stiffened. My mother turned to follow the governor's gaze, and when she realized it led to me, color rose under her foundation. She did not look ashamed. Not yet. She looked annoyed, as if I had somehow stepped into the path of a spotlight she had carefully aimed elsewhere. Governor Carter took 2 steps in my direction, before Grant moved with the smooth confidence of a man used to intercepting opportunity. "Governor," he said warmly, crossing the polished floor with his hand extended, "we are honored you could join us. I cannot tell you how much it means to both families." The governor stopped, but he did not take Grant's hand immediately. His attention flicked from Grant to me again, and something unreadable passed across his face. "Mr. Ellison?" he said. His voice was polite, controlled, the voice of someone who had spent decades learning to keep private emotion from becoming public sound. Grant laughed as if they were old friends. "Please call me Grant. We were just about to say a few words. Vanessa and I are so grateful you came. My father is right over here, and I know he has been eager to speak with you about the Foundation initiative." Normally that sentence would have worked. Men like Grant knew how to redirect powerful men toward other powerful men. They knew how to build small corridors of importance and guide attention through them. But Governor Carter did not move toward Grant's father. He looked past Grant's shoulder at me again. "In a moment," he said. My mother appeared beside me so quickly I barely heard her approach. She plucked 2 empty glasses from my tray with a forced smile and whispered through her teeth, "Kitchen. Now." I did not move. "Rachel." Her voice stayed low, but the old command was there, the one that had once been enough to send me apologizing before I understood what I had done wrong. "You are not part of this." Something in me answered silently, "I know. That is what you made clear." But my feet stayed rooted to the floor. Across the room, Governor Carter stepped around Grant. The photographer lifted his camera again, sensing something unscripted, and my mother saw it too. Panic sharpened her face. She reached for my elbow, not gently this time. "Do not make a scene," she said. I looked down at her hand. "I am not the one making one." Vanessa hurried over, her beaded gown catching the light in bright, frantic sparks. "Mom, what is happening?" she whispered. Then to me, with a smile for the guests, "Rachel, sweetheart, why don't you help in the kitchen? The caterers need you." Sweetheart. I almost laughed. She had not called me that since we were children, and even then usually only when she wanted the bigger cookie. "Do they?" I asked. "Or do you?" Her eyes widened in warning. "Please, not tonight." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the diamonds and perfect hair, behind the trembling engagement smile, she was frightened. Not for me, not of what had been done to me. She was frightened that the wrong version of me might be seen by the right people. "That seems to be everyone's request," I said quietly. "Not tonight, not here, not where it matters." Grant returned then, his expression tight beneath its polished surface. "Is there a problem?" he asked. And though he spoke to Vanessa, his eyes rested on me as if I were a stain spreading across linen. "No problem," my mother said quickly. "Rachel was just going back to assist the staff." "I never agreed to assist the staff," I said. The words were not loud, but they traveled. A few guests turned. Someone near the mantel lowered her glass. Grant's mouth curved in disbelief. "You are wearing an apron." "Because my mother handed it to me." The room shifted again, a subtle ripple of discomfort. The kind that comes when people realize they may have laughed too early at someone else's humiliation. My mother's nails pressed into her clutch. "Rachel has always had a flair for drama," she said lightly, to no one and everyone. "She helps at hospitals, you know. Very intense environment. It makes her a little emotional." There it was, the lifelong reduction. Not hurt, emotional. Not mistreated, dramatic. Not overlooked, difficult. I could feel heat rising in my throat, but before I could answer, a server brushed past me carrying a tray of hot consommé cups, and Vanessa, in her rush to move closer to Grant, knocked her elbow backward. The tray in my hands tilted. One flute rolled, hit the marble floor, and shattered with a bright crack that made everyone gasp. Champagne splashed across the hem of my pale blue dress, darkening the fabric beneath the black apron. Silence fell fast. Vanessa pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God, Rachel, be careful." The injustice of it was so clean, so effortless, that I could barely breathe. She had hit the tray. She had caused the spill. Yet, in the space of 1 second, the room accepted that I must have failed at even this. Grant exhaled a short laugh, not kind enough to hide. "Maybe serving is harder than it looks." A few guests smiled awkwardly. My mother stepped in front of the broken glass as if hiding it with her body could erase the moment. "Everyone, please. It is nothing. Staff will handle it." Staff. I was still holding the tray. I was still wearing the apron. I was still her daughter, though she had now found the safest word to bury that fact. I knelt to pick up the larger shards because old instinct is cruel. It teaches you to clean the mess even when you are the one bleeding. A sliver of glass sliced the side of my finger. The pain was small, almost welcome, something sharp enough to make the rest of the room feel distant. A drop of blood appeared against my skin. I stared at it and thought of Ethan Carter's blood on my hands 3 weeks ago, the hospital lights, the elevator doors, the way he had whispered that he did not want his father to see him scared. I had known what to do then. I had known how to move through fear. So why, in this room full of flowers and polished lies, did I feel so powerless? "Rachel," my mother whispered, bending slightly without helping. "Get up and go to the kitchen before you embarrass yourself further." I looked up at her. "Further?" She froze, because there was something in my voice she did not recognize. Maybe I did not recognize it either. I stood slowly, leaving the remaining glass on the floor. A real server came forward with a broom, eyes lowered but face tight with sympathy. I wanted to apologize to her, not because I had made the mess, but because my family had made her witness the way people with money often mistake cruelty for order. Governor Carter had reached the edge of the circle now. Grant tried once more, stepping into his path. "Governor, I am sorry about the interruption. Family things. You understand." The governor's eyes moved to the broken glass, then to my damp dress, then to the apron tied around my waist and the cut on my finger. His expression changed in a way that made Grant's confidence falter. "Family things," he repeated. The words sounded heavier when he said them. My mother laughed too brightly. Rachel insisted on helping. She has always preferred being useful. We are very proud of her, of course. I turned to look at her, and something like grief moved through me, quieter than anger and much older. Proud. She had offered the word only after a powerful man was close enough to hear it. Vanessa nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. Rachel is wonderful with people in need. Grant added. Very service-minded. Service-minded. Useful. Emotional. Difficult. Awkward. Word after word. All carefully selected to place me somewhere beneath them while sounding kind enough to survive public inspection. The photographer's camera clicked again. A local reporter near the hallway leaned toward her cameraman, whispering. The live TV light mounted on a small camera rig glowed red from the far side of the foyer. I suddenly understood that this was no longer just a private humiliation. My family had tried to make me invisible in a room with cameras, and now every attempt to hide me was making people look harder. Governor Carter did not smile. He stepped past Grant, past Vanessa, past my mother, until he stood directly in front of me. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. I still had the tray in one hand and a napkin pressed around my bleeding finger with the other. My apron was crooked. Champagne stained my dress. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it above the string quartet, which had finally gone silent. Up close, the governor looked more tired than he did on television. There were lines around his eyes that no campaign photograph had kept. For a second, he did not speak. He only looked at me, and in that look was the hospital corridor at dawn, the operating room doors, the fear of a father waiting for news that could break him. Then his voice softened. "Miss Morgan," he said, clear enough for the nearest guests and the cameras to hear. "I have been looking for you." My mother's face went blank. Vanessa's lips parted. Grant's hand, still half raised in political greeting, lowered slowly to his side. I could not answer. I could only stand there, holding the tray they had given me, while the most powerful man in the room bowed his head to me with unmistakable respect. "I have been looking for you." Governor Carter said the words so clearly that they seemed to strike every glass, every chandelier crystal, every polished surface in the room. For a second, no one moved. Even the photographer lowered his camera slightly, as if he needed his own eyes to confirm what the lens had just caught. I stood there with the serving tray in one hand and a napkin wrapped around my bleeding finger, wearing an apron my mother had handed me like a sentence, while the governor of the state looked at me with the kind of respect my own family had never managed to fake convincingly. My first instinct was to step backward. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I had spent most of my life being trained not to occupy space when important people entered a room. My mother moved first. "Governor Carter," she said brightly, too brightly, stepping between us with the desperate elegance of a woman trying to pull a curtain back across an open wound. "What an honor. I'm Patricia Morgan, Vanessa's mother. We are so grateful you could join this very special family celebration." She extended her hand. He looked at it for half a beat before shaking it, not rudely, not warmly. "Mrs. Morgan." My mother's smile widened with relief, but only for a moment, because his gaze returned to me. "Rachel Morgan," he said. Hearing my full name in his voice made the room tilt in a new direction. People began whispering softly. Vanessa's eyes darted from me to the governor and back again, searching for a reasonable explanation that would keep her world intact. Grant's father, a heavy-set man with silver hair and the red face of someone who disliked surprises, stepped forward from the fireplace. "Governor, perhaps we should move into the study. There are several people eager to speak with you." "In a moment," Governor Carter said again, and the repetition felt less like politeness this time and more like a boundary. He turned back to me. "I hope to meet you properly at the hospital, but they told me your shift had ended before my son was stable enough for visitors." The tray slipped slightly in my hand. I tightened my grip. The word son moved through the guests like a match dropped into dry grass. My mother's head turned sharply toward me. Vanessa's lips parted. Grant looked suddenly alert, no longer merely annoyed, but calculating. "Governor," I said quietly, because even now, with all those eyes on me, confidentiality lived in my bones. "I'm glad he recovered." His face changed at that, softened by something too private for a room full of strangers. "He is alive because people at Mercy General refused to give up on him. The surgical team saved him, and you got him to the surgical team in time." A low murmur rose around us. I wanted the floor to open, not because I was ashamed of what I had done, but because I could feel my family's attention changing and the change hurt almost as much as the humiliation had. Only minutes earlier, I had been an inconvenience, a problem to move toward the kitchen. Now the same people were looking at me as if I had been translated into a language they suddenly respected. My mother laughed softly, but there was a crack beneath it. "Rachel, darling, you didn't mention you had met the governor's son." "Darling." I turned my head toward her. The word sounded so strange from her mouth that for a moment I could not answer. "It was a patient matter," I said. "I wasn't allowed to discuss it." "Of course," she replied quickly, turning toward the guests. "Rachel is very discreet. She has always been very committed to her little hospital work." Little. Even then, she could not help herself. Governor Carter heard it. I knew he did because his expression went still. He looked at my apron, then at the tray in my hand, then at the champagne stain on my dress. "Are you working this event tonight, Miss Morgan?" The question was calm, but the room felt the danger inside it before my mother did. Grant moved beside Vanessa and slipped an arm around her waist, the protective gesture of a man protecting not a woman, but an image. "Rachel was kind enough to help with a staffing issue," he said. "Family pitches in, you know how it is." "Do I?" the governor asked. Grant's smile froze. My mother stepped in again. "It was nothing formal. Rachel enjoys helping. She's always been more comfortable behind the scenes." I looked at her hands. They were clasped tightly around her champagne flute, her diamond bracelet flashing under the chandelier. Behind the scenes. That was where she had kept me all night. All my life, if I was honest. Behind Vanessa's achievements. Behind family photographs. Behind conversations about pride. Behind the image she wanted to sell. And yet now she was trying to turn that exile into a personality trait, as if invisibility had been my preference. Governor Carter did not look away from me. "Is that true?" he asked. The room waited. I could feel Vanessa willing me to say yes. I could feel my mother's warning like a hand around my throat. I could feel Grant's irritation, the press camera, the guests, the old habit of smoothing everything over so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. My mouth opened, and for one terrible second I nearly obeyed them. Then I remembered Ethan Carter's hand around my wrist in the elevator, his voice shaking as he said he did not want his father to see him scared. I had told him his job was not to look brave. His job was to stay alive. Maybe my job tonight was not to look gracious. Maybe my job was simply to tell the truth. "No," I said. The word was small, but it landed like a dropped glass. My mother inhaled. Vanessa's eyes filled instantly, not with remorse, but with panic. "Rachel?" she whispered. I looked at Governor Carter, because if I looked at my family, I might lose courage. "I came here as a guest. I thought I was invited as my sister's sister. When I arrived, my name wasn't on the seating list. My mother brought me to the kitchen and gave me this apron because they were short on servers." The room went utterly silent. Not polite silent. Exposed silent. The kind of silence where people begin revising their own memories in real time, remembering the tray in my hands, the jokes they laughed at, the way they had accepted my lowered place because someone else had assigned it. My mother's face tightened. "That is not fair." "It is accurate," I said. "Those are not the same thing." Vanessa stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Rachel, please. You're making this sound cruel." I turned to her, and for once, I did not soften my face to protect her. "What would you call it?" She had no answer. Grant did. Men like him always do. "This is inappropriate," he said, his voice low but carrying. "This is my engagement party, and I won't have it turned into some emotional grievance display." Governor Carter slowly turned toward him. "Mr. Ellison, I would choose your next sentence very carefully." The warning was so quiet that it was almost elegant. Grant's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His father looked furious. His mother looked as though she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. The camera light near the foyer glowed red. A reporter stood beside it, still enough that I knew the camera was recording. My heart pounded harder. Governor Carter saw it too. He glanced at the camera, then at me. "Would you prefer that I say nothing more here?" he asked. The question stunned me. After everything, after the recognition, after the power he could have used without asking, he gave me a choice. No one in my family had done that all night. My throat tightened. "I don't want your son's private medical details exposed," I said. "Nor do I," he replied. "But I can speak about my gratitude without violating his privacy." He faced the room then, and the shift was unmistakable. The politician was there now, but so was the father. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, I came tonight intending to offer congratulations to a young couple and greet friends of this family. But before I do any of that, I need to correct something I have just witnessed." My mother's glass trembled. Vanessa's face drained of color. Grant stared straight ahead, anger burning beneath his stillness. The governor extended his hand toward me, not pulling, not commanding, simply inviting. My fingers tightened around the tray. For a moment I could not move. Then an actual server stepped forward, a young woman with kind eyes, and gently took the tray from my hand as if returning something that should never have been mine to carry. "I've got it," she whispered. The kindness nearly undid me. I untied the apron slowly. The knot resisted, as if even the fabric had accepted my place more readily than I had. When it finally came loose, I folded it once and placed it over the tray. My pale blue dress was still stained, my fingers still bled through the napkin. But when I stepped beside Governor Carter, I felt taller than I had when I entered that house. He did not touch me until I nodded. Then he took my uninjured hand with both of his, turned toward the cameras in the room and said, "This woman stood between my son and death when there was no audience, no applause, and no benefit to herself. Her name is Rachel Morgan, and every person in this room should know exactly who she is." The room drew in one collective breath. My mother looked as if the floor had vanished beneath her. Vanessa covered her mouth. Grant's polished face cracked open with humiliation, and Governor Carter, still holding my hand with unmistakable respect, looked directly toward the glowing live camera and prepared to tell the world the truth they had all tried so hard not to see. The governor's words did not explode through the room. They settled over it with a weight so complete that even the people who had spent the evening pretending not to see me could no longer look anywhere else. This woman stood between my son and death. Her name is Rachel Morgan. Every person in this room should know exactly who she is. I had heard praise before in small, passing ways from patients who squeezed my hand before discharge, from nurses who mouthed thank you across crowded hallways, from doctors too exhausted to say more than a nod after a crisis passed. But praise inside a ballroom was different. Praise beneath chandeliers, in front of cameras, while my mother stood 10 feet away with her mouth slightly open and my sister's engagement ring flashing against a trembling hand, felt less like recognition and more like lightning striking a house that had been dry for years. Governor Carter still held my uninjured hand, not tightly, not possessively, but with the careful steadiness of someone lending strength without taking control. The live camera remained pointed toward us. A small red light glowed at the edge of my vision. I thought of Ethan in the trauma bay, gray-faced and frightened, whispering that he did not want his father to see him scared. I wondered if he was watching now from some recovery room or family home, embarrassed by all this attention, alive enough to be embarrassed. That thought steadied me more than anything else. "Governor," I said softly, "I was one person on a team." "Yes," he replied, just as softly, but the microphone from a nearby reporter caught him anyway. "And every team depends on the person who sees what others miss." The reporter, a young woman in a navy dress with a press badge hanging crookedly from her neck, stepped half a pace forward. "Governor Carter, can you clarify Miss Morgan's role in your son's care?" My mother shifted as if she might interrupt, but Governor Carter raised one hand slightly, and the movement was enough to stop her. "Without discussing private medical details," he said, "I can say that my son arrived at Mercy General in critical condition after a crash. Miss Morgan recognized that his condition was deteriorating before it was obvious to others. She pushed for immediate surgical intervention. That decision helped save his life." A murmur rolled through the guests. It was not the shallow murmur of gossip now. It had embarrassment in it, recalculation, a room full of people revisiting the last hour and understanding the tray, the apron, the jokes, the way Grant had said, "At least she knows where she belongs." Grant's face had gone pale under his tan. He looked at the camera, then at his father, then at Vanessa, as though searching for the person most useful to blame. Vanessa stared at me with tears gathering in her eyes, but I knew my sister well enough to recognize the difference between remorse and fear. Remorse looks at the person who was hurt. Fear looks at who saw it happen. My mother stepped forward with a smile that had been repaired too quickly. "Governor, that is incredibly kind of you to say. We are, of course, very proud of Rachel. She has always had such a servant's heart." Servant's heart. The phrase floated into the room wrapped in lace and poison. She meant it to sound loving. She meant to fold the apron, the tray, the missing seat, and the humiliation into something noble, something voluntary, something she could claim as family virtue now that my work had become valuable in public. Governor Carter turned toward her slowly. "Mrs. Morgan, did you know what your daughter had done for my son before tonight?" My mother's smile flickered. "Rachel is very private about her work." That was not my question. The room seemed to lean in. My mother's fingers tightened around her glass. "No," she said at last. "I did not know." "And when she arrived tonight, you gave her an apron?" Vanessa made a small sound. "Governor, there was a misunderstanding," she said, stepping closer, her voice sweet and pleading. "Rachel offered to help. She's family. We all help each other." I looked at her then, and her sentence collapsed before I had to touch it. She knew. She had watched me carrying trays. She had let Grant laugh. She had looked away when my name was missing from the seating chart. The camera saw her looking away now, too. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "do not turn my silence into consent." Her eyes filled over. I didn't mean for it to feel like that. It felt exactly like what it was. Grant's father, clearly deciding that a wounded woman was easier to face than an angry governor, forced a laugh. "Surely we can all agree this has become unnecessarily dramatic. This is meant to be a celebration." Governor Carter's gaze sharpened. "It is remarkable how often people call truth dramatic when it interrupts comfort." That sentence ended the older man's smile. Then another voice came from the foyer, breathless but familiar. "Rachel?" I turned and saw Marlene Ortiz, the night charge nurse from Mercy General, standing near the press cluster in a dark coat over navy scrubs. Her hair was pulled back in the same severe bun she wore on shift, and her expression was the kind she used when residents ignored call lights. I had never been so relieved and so afraid to see anyone. "Marlene," I said, "what are you doing here?" She lifted her phone slightly. "Hospital administration called me when the broadcast started. They wanted someone present who could make sure no patient privacy got trampled by politics." She looked at Governor Carter with professional caution. "No offense, sir." For the first time that night, he almost smiled. "None taken." Marlene crossed the room and stopped beside me. Her eyes dropped to my cut finger, then the champagne stain, then the folded apron on the tray behind us. Her face hardened. "Rachel Morgan has stayed past the end of her shift more times than I can count," she said. Not to the governor, but to the room. "She has sat with elderly patients whose families never came. She has found medication vouchers for people who were too embarrassed to ask. She has translated discharge instructions into plain English for parents who were scared they would hurt their children by misunderstanding a label. She does not talk about it because she thinks doing the work matters more than being seen doing it." My throat burned. "Marlene." "No," she said, turning to me. "You spend your life making sure people are not left alone in their worst moments. You can survive being seen in this one." The room blurred slightly. I blinked hard. My mother looked cornered now, and something desperate entered her face. She moved toward me with open arms, performing tenderness for the camera, before tenderness had time to become real. "Rachel, sweetheart, come here. I had no idea you felt so hurt." I stepped back. Her arms remained suspended between us. The silence that followed was sharper than any accusation. "You did know," I said. My voice did not shake, and that surprised me. "You knew when you gave me the apron. You knew when you told me to stay away from the photographer. You knew when you called Vanessa the daughter who made this family proud, while I stood behind you holding champagne. You may not have known about Ethan Carter, but you knew I was your daughter." My mother lowered her hands. The room had no mercy left to offer her. Vanessa was crying openly now, one hand over her mouth, the engagement ring catching the light like proof of a dream souring in real time. Grant stepped forward, anger breaking through his polish. "This is absurd. Rachel, nobody forced you to stay. If you felt mistreated, you could have left." I turned to him. "People like you always say that after making sure every door out costs someone their dignity." His face reddened. The reporter's eyes widened slightly, and the camera operator adjusted his angle. Grant seemed to remember the broadcast at the same moment. He swallowed whatever he had planned to say next. Governor Carter looked from Grant to the apron, then to my mother and Vanessa. "I came here tonight to congratulate your family," he said. "Instead, I find the woman who helped save my son serving your guests without a seat at the table. I have only one question." His voice remained calm, which made it devastating. "Why is the woman who saved my son being treated like staff in her own family's celebration?" No one answered. Not my mother, not Vanessa, not Grant. Not the guests who had laughed softly when he mocked me. The question hung over the flowers, the candles, the untouched champagne, and every expensive lie in the room. Finally, I reached behind me. took the folded apron from the tray, and placed it on the nearest gold-rimmed table as gently as if I were setting down something breakable. "I think I am finished serving tonight," I said. Then I removed the napkin from my finger, looked at the small line of blood beneath it, and understood that not every wound needed to be hidden before it could heal. Governor Carter nodded once. Marlene stood beside me like a wall, and as the live camera continued recording, I turned away from the table where my name had never been placed, and walked toward the front doors without asking anyone's permission to leave. The cold air outside the Ellison estate hit my face like mercy. Behind me, the party had not ended, but something inside it had. Through the tall front windows, I could still see chandeliers glowing over white roses and gold chairs, still see guests standing in frozen clusters with their phones in their hands, still see the live camera light burning red near the foyer like a witness that refused to blink. But out on the front steps, with my stained dress moving around my knees and my cut finger tucked against my palm, I could finally breathe without feeling as if I had to ask permission first. Marlene came out behind me, carrying my coat. She did not speak right away. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. People who work in hospitals learn that not every wound needs immediate conversation. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stand close enough to help, and quiet enough not to take over. She draped the coat around my shoulders, then took my hand and inspected the cut with the same sharp focus she used at triage. "Small," she said. "Clean it properly when you get home." I gave a tired laugh. "That is your emotional support?" "No, that is your medical instruction. My emotional support is that I have wanted to tell your mother off for 7 years, and tonight saved me the trouble." I laughed again, but this time, it cracked into something dangerously close to crying. Marlene's face softened. "You did good, Rachel." I looked back at the house. "Did I?" "You told the truth. In front of everyone. Sometimes that is the only place people stop pretending they cannot hear it." The front door opened again before I could answer. Governor Carter stepped out with one member of his security team, but he waved the man back a few feet. Without the ballroom around him, he looked less like a governor and more like a tired father in an expensive suit. "Miss Morgan," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I owe you an apology." I shook my head. "You do not. I put you in a difficult position." "No," I said, glancing toward the windows where my mother's silver dress had appeared briefly and vanished again. "They did that before you arrived." He accepted that with a quiet nod. "Ethan is watching from home. He asked me to tell you he is sorry the night became about him." My chest tightened. "Tell him it did not. Tell him I am glad he is alive. He also said you told him his job was not to look brave. It was to stay alive." I remembered the elevator doors, the blood, his fingers gripping my wrist. I did. "He has repeated that sentence every day since surgery." The governor's voice changed slightly. "So have I." For a moment, the anger, humiliation, and public shock all fell away, leaving only the simplest truth. A young man had survived. That mattered more than the broken party behind me. It mattered more than Grant's arrogance, Vanessa's tears, my mother's panic. I swallowed hard. "He did the hard part." "Perhaps," Governor Carter said. "But you gave him permission not to perform strength while he was fighting for his life. People underestimate how rare that kindness is." He handed me a card. "My office will be reaching out to Mercy General about a community health initiative we have been trying to build. After tonight, I would be honored if you would consider advising us. Not as a symbol, as someone who understands what people actually need before the cameras arrive." I stared at the card, then at him. For years, I had been told that my work was small because it happened in crowded hallways, because it smelled like antiseptic instead of perfume, because it did not come with gala invitations or engraved place cards. Now the governor of the state was asking me to help shape something that might reach families like the ones I saw every night. Parents choosing between medicine and groceries, elderly patients too proud to ask for transportation, children whose symptoms became emergencies because help had always been too far away. "I will think about it," I said. "That is all I ask." He shook my hand once more, then left me with Marlene under the white porch lights. I did not go back inside for my purse. Marlene did. She returned with it 5 minutes later and a look on her face that suggested several people had tried to speak to her and regretted it. "Your mother is crying," she said. "Vanessa is crying. Grant is furious. Grant's father is pretending to take phone calls. Half the guests are leaving. The other half are watching the news clip on their phones while still standing in the room where it happened." I closed my eyes. I do not want to see it. Tonight, maybe ever. But of course I did see it. By morning, everyone had. The clip traveled faster than dignity could recover. News sites called it the engagement party moment that stunned the state. Social media did what social media does. It flattened a painful life into a handful of sentences and 1,000 opinions. Some strangers called me a hero. Some called my family cruel. Some argued over whether I should have spoken up sooner, as if people raised to swallow pain can suddenly cough up truth on command. Someone slowed down the video of Grant saying I knew where I belonged and placed it beside the governor saying every person should know who I was. By noon it had millions of views. By 3, Mercy General's Public Relations Department had issued a careful statement praising all emergency staff involved in Ethan Carter's care. By evening, Grant Ellison had released a statement about private family misunderstandings, which only made people angrier because nothing looks smaller than a powerful man trying to rename cruelty after cameras catch it. My mother called me 17 times that day. I did not answer until the 18th. When I finally did, I was sitting at my kitchen table in sweatpants, my finger bandaged, a mug of tea cooling between my hands. "Rachel," she said, and for once my name did not sound like a correction. It sounded like a plea. "I am so sorry." I stared at the steam rising from the cup. "For what?" Silence. Then softly, "For last night." "Which part?" Another silence, longer this time. I could almost hear her realizing that a general apology would not be enough to cover a specific history. "For giving you the apron," she said. "For not putting your name on the seating chart. For letting Vanessa matter more because it was easier to celebrate her. For making you feel like helping people made you less impressive than being admired by them." My eyes burned. Some apologies arrive too late to fix what they name. But that does not mean they do not matter. "You did not make me feel that way, Mom," I said. "You taught me to expect it." She cried then, and for the first time in my life, I did not rush to comfort her. Her sadness was real, but it was not my responsibility to carry. Vanessa came to my apartment 2 days later, without Grant. She stood in my doorway wearing no diamonds, no perfect makeup, no engagement glow. "I was jealous of you," she said before I could ask why she had come. I almost laughed from shock. "Of me? You never needed people the way I did. I thought Mom loved me more because I was better. But maybe she loved the version of me that made her look successful." She wiped her cheeks. "That does not excuse what I did." "No," I said. "It does not." She nodded as if she deserved the answer. Maybe she did. We talked for 20 minutes. We did not hug. Healing did not require a pretty ending by Friday. Grant sent flowers. I donated them to the nurses' station. Governor Carter's office called the next week. I said yes to the community health initiative, not because the public now admired me, but because the work had always mattered before anyone applauded it. 6 months later, I stood at a podium outside a newly opened mobile clinic funded by the state and Mercy General, watching families line up for free screenings, vaccinations, medication counseling, and follow-up referrals. Marlene stood in the front row pretending not to cry. Ethan Carter, thinner but walking, smiled beside his father. My mother watched from the back with her hands folded in front of her, and Vanessa stood near her quietly, both of them guests in a life they no longer controlled. A reporter asked me if I had forgiven my family. I looked at the clinic behind me, at the nurses moving through the crowd, at the people who had come not for drama but for help. "I am learning what forgiveness can be," I said. "But I have already learned what dignity is. Dignity is not waiting for someone to give you a chair at their table. Sometimes dignity is walking out, building a bigger table, and making sure no one else has to stand in the corner holding a tray." The applause rose slowly at first, then stronger, warmer, real. I did not look for my mother's approval before accepting it. I did not look for Vanessa's tears or Grant's regret or the internet's permission. I simply stood there as myself, Rachel Morgan, a woman who had spent years being useful in silence, and finally understood that silence had never made her small. And if this story touched you, if you have ever been treated like your kindness made you weak or your quiet work made you invisible, leave a comment below and tell me where you found your strength. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their value. Subscribe for more stories about truth, dignity, and second chances, and never forget this: the people who overlook you do not get the final vote on who you are.